Now, you can imagine a world where putting your administrator access key and secret key and trusting GitHub with it is probably not the best. Not to say that GitHub is not trustworthy, but it's the internet, right? And if you put in that key to be able to do all the command line stuff we're doing from our laptops, and something happens, because stuff happens, that's not a good look, right? And so what we want to do is we want to create a user with a policy that has access to the bare minimum that we would need to build a CI/CD pipeline, which is predominantly like, cool, you should be able to like put stuff in that bucket, and you should be able to issue invalidations if that's the like spiritual path that you went down, and like that's it, right? Even that's not great if you're if GitHub gets hacked, because they could theoretically push that bucket with that. But hopefully, like in a big enough hack, you're rushing to to get in there and fix it as well, and you need to mitigate it. So yeah. The other options are, self-host, something Jenkins, have fun. But for now, for our cases, this will work. So let's go ahead and go through the part where we are going to create a policy. So let's go back into IAM in this case. Let's see, which one? I don't need my S3 bucket anymore. We'll use that tab. All right, we'll go ahead and we're going to create a brand new policy which is unique for our CI/CD process. So is there one of the 915 that already exists that maybe does this? I don't think so, but like I accept the possibility that out of 915 of them, maybe there's one that does something similar. So we'll hit create policy. Okay, so now we got a little visual editor. And choose a service. There's lots of them. Let's say CloudFront. Let's see just look at cloud. That's the number of things in AWS that start with cloud. So naming things, it's hard. CloudFront, it does two things. We're basically going to set up cache invalidation on something that's named with the cloud. Naming things and cache invalidation are two of the hardest problems in computer science, and off by one errors. OK, so we don't want to give it all CloudFront actions, right? We just want to give it the ability for creating invalidations. All right, and then which one? Let's see, that is the CloudFront in the distribution ID. I need to go back and get. This is not one of the ones that is going to manually fill it in for you or give you the dropdown like it did in Route 53 or a few other places. So we go back. Now we want, remember before I was like, for the OAI, you didn't want this one that starts with an E. You wanted the other one that started with a capital E. Now you want this one that starts with a capital E. OK, so now we'll go back in here and we'll paste that in. So this is kind of familiar. It's like this is, we're saying Amazon resource number for AWS CloudFront. This is our account number that we made in the very beginning. Like yours is obviously different than mine. We made in the very beginning of the workshop for this distribution and which CloudFront distribution. So we'll put that one in there as well. And then we want to add additional permissions. And we will choose a service. And this time we want S3. Cool. And so now what we want to do is, for this one, we want put object. And I believe it needs access to list object as well. List bucket, rather. So you can see what's in the bucket. You can put stuff in the bucket. That's about it. All right, one selected and one selected. Perfect. That should do the trick. If not, we'll find out when we go to deploy, and we'll get told exactly what permission we're forgetting. Next, the tags. So we've got that in place. I don't see the S3 one, which means there's probably one additional button that I missed. So I'm going to go back. It's there.
Do we need to set the resource?
Oh, yeah, this one we have to tell it which bucket. So in this case, we want super awesome dot click. I like that it was just going to let me make a policy, just missing S3 completely, instead of at any point show me an error about the issue. So that's great. Super awesome dot click. And this one will give it access to everything in the bucket, just like when we made it by hand before. So one of those is, I believe, for the list bucket, because it doesn't need to know which thing's in the bucket. So we'll go ahead and we'll create that policy. One of the questions we got earlier, you can see this one's got CloudFront S3, was if you blow past the 1,000 free invalidations, how much do they cost beyond that? It is half a penny per invalidation. We looked it up during the break. Like I said, you get 1,000. Now, to be fair, the 1,000 invalidations is spread across all of the CloudFront distributions in that account, right? So like that is not 1,000 just for that distribution. It is 1,000 across all of them. And like I had that conversation, like, well, what if we deploy more than 1,000 times a month? I'm like, I would love that problem, right, personally. But yeah, it is relatively cheap beyond that. But that might, if there's some other reason why you might be casting invalidations above and beyond just deploy on a deploy, then some of the other playing with the time to lives might be the right choice in this case. OK, so we'll give this name. We need to give the policy a name. And we'll say, like, build process. I don't know. I don't love that name. But how about deploy static assets? I like that name better. You can give it a description. You don't necessarily have to. And we'll create that policy. All right, so now we have this new customer managed one. This is different than all the AWS ones. Now that's just a policy. That is a set of permissions that we can apply to different users. If you remember when we made our administrator before, we manually applied a set of permissions. Now we have our own set, which is deploy static assets that we can put onto any user that we create. So what we need to do is we need to create another user different from our administrator, whose sole job is it can deploy to this one bucket and cast invalidations on one distribution, right? Yeah, still not ideal if we lose control of that user. Also, when we put it in GitHub, we will encrypt all those things. But yeah, like still a risk, but the blast area is a lot smaller in this case. So we'll go to users. And this should be somewhat familiar. I'm going to add a user. This one I'll call build process. So this one's going to be a little bit different than the administrator because we knew with the administrator we wanted to log in, right? And like play around in the console. Our CI/CD pipeline should not be able to log in and click buttons. It should only have an API key. So we will keep access key, programmatic access, turned on. And even then, we know it has very limited amount, or will have very limited amount of that access. And then it gets no password, right? It should not be able to log into the console at all. So now, instead of, actually, we want to click this one right here. And then we want to, instead of picking one of the AWS ones, we have our deploy static assets policy. So now we can apply that one as well. So now we'll have created a user that can only do one thing. We're not going to use tags in this case, and deploy static assets. Right? This is, again, that very arduous screen. if you mess this up and you just click away from it, you will have to regenerate the key, which you can do on the overall users as the administrator. So either go show yourself that secret access key and copy it somewhere for the time being, or in my case, I'm going to download the CSV and hope that I don't confuse it with the other one that I downloaded earlier. And then once you close this page, there is no way to see that key again unless you go ahead and regenerate it. Cool. All right, so that's we have a user that can now, from GitHub, deploy. The next step is we need to set that up.